Hello friends, Sarah here. It's a lovely day where I am, and I hope it is where you are too. Today we're going to talk about loneliness, and I guess the reason why I am interested in talking about loneliness is because I think that there is still a huge stigma about talking it through and really thinking with friends and family about how loneliness affects our lives. It's a really tricky subject to talk about, I think, because it carries so much shame, because we understand that if you're lonely, it's because there's something wrong with you, that you're not connected to society for whatever reason. And there is so much wrong with that kind of level of understanding. It's so much more complicated than that. 1.2 million people in the UK report feeling lonely. And when we talk about feelings of loneliness, we're talking about feelings of loneliness that impact on your daily life. The government have committed £20 million to community groups who are going to be looking at developing interventions for loneliness in the community and drawing people and communities together to try and combat loneliness. The Great Campaign, the campaign to end loneliness, is incredibly successful and is also trying to bring the subject to the forefront of our thinking and planning. We know that loneliness is as harmful as 15 cigarettes a day, that it can reduce life expectancy by 29%. That is incredibly significant. And yet we're still struggling to talk it through. We also associate loneliness simply with age, that if you're older, you're inevitably going to be lonely. When actually recent research has told us that one of the loneliest groups indeed is 16 to 25-year-olds. And in fact, they are 63% more likely to be lonely than people who are over the age of 65, 70. And there are some reasons for that. People argue that, ageing, you become more resilient to loneliness, that you kind of understand yourself better, and that maybe you have made different types of connections for yourself, and that when you're 16 to 25, you're still working all that through. That may be so. The digital world, I often am on a train or a bus, and I always take a moment to look around the carriage. And very rarely do I see two people chatting. Often people are looking at their smartphones or listening to something on their earphones. I do it myself because for me, I like to kind of do my own thing and not really fond of talking to people sitting next to me on the train. A little bit of a personality trait. But the reality is that personality is not about whether you're going to be lonely or not. It's not the kind of deciding factor. We often talk about, don't we, extroverts versus introverts and who is likely to be more lonely. In fact, your life circumstances are much more important in terms of whether you're going to experience loneliness or not. So if you are isolated because of a physical disability or a long-term health condition, or you suffer from mental health problems like anxiety and depression, all of these things mean that interacting with the external world is much more difficult. Of course it is. And yet we think simply that loneliness can be corrected by just going and meeting new people. And often when we talk to somebody who expresses loneliness, which I think is quite rare because of the stigma, we might catch ourselves saying, well, just join a club. I don't know about you, but even as somebody who is an extrovert, going to join a club isn't something that I would find easy at all. So the Charity Mind has come up with some really easy steps about what we can do to kind of combat loneliness. We understand the health implications, therefore it is incredibly serious, and we must think it through. We must find solutions. So Mind talk about identifying what is making you lonely. Is it your physical disability? Is it your mental health problem? Is it the fact that, you're no longer at work? Is it the fact that, you're a young person and haven't managed to find a kind of mutual friendship group? yet. Once you can work out what the source of your loneliness is, you have a better chance of finding the solutions. So there's something about working out what's the source and then thinking about what is the best route to combating that loneliness. So for some people who perhaps employment is the source, volunteering is something that can happen quite quickly and can happen in a place that you enjoy and that you have some resonance with. And volunteering, I think, has been a solution for many people, certainly that I know personally. We also talk about finding your tribe, and I've used that language in previous films. So, what are your interests? And there are online groups that provide kind of sources of opportunities for people to get together when they're interested. There is a very kind of well-known website called Meetups, which brings people together who have shared interests. And I certainly know people who've also used that and have had positive experiences. Often, making that first step can be really scary. And so actually, it's about taking it slowly. And it might take 4 or 5 attempts before you find something that makes sense for you. Social contact is incredibly important. We're social beings. And so loneliness can be the flag that reminds us that we do need that contact to stay well. But we do need to take it slowly. And so what we don't want people to do is to rush in to a kind of social situation, which could inevitably, if done badly, could set somebody back in terms of anxiety particularly. So take a pause, make sure it's still working out for you. If loneliness is really kind of ongoing and difficult to kind of shift, you may need some extra help, you may need some talking therapies, you might need to think about, actually, is it kind of falling into depression, anxiety perhaps? Loneliness is not a kind of, a situation which you can get over and then you can move on with your life. It's something that can come and go. I know in periods of my life when I felt lonely and felt that loneliness has been harmful, it's been momentary and I've been able to kind of move on and come back into a kind of social circle. But there have also been times, certainly when I experienced postnatal depression, when those feelings of loneliness were really quite traumatic and uncomfortable to even think about today. So I guess what I'm saying is that once you overcome that kind of experience of loneliness, I think we need to be prepared for the fact that it may happen again, and that social interaction is an ongoing requirement of our lives. But it's got to be right for you. We've got to think about young people and spaces. We always talk about austerity and how austerity has affected community spaces, community action. And these are the things that certainly we at the Centre for Mental Health lobby in policy terms. But in real terms, for you as an individual, being lonely is not a kind of experience that you often want to talk about or share. But actually talking about it and sharing it is the first step to changing it for you. We'll attach some information about various campaigns and opportunities for people to think about loneliness and what they might do, along with the narrative of this film. It's hard to talk about, but we do need to talk about it. 1.2 million people is 1.2 million too many. If you want to reach out to somebody that you know who you suspect is feeling lonely or is indeed told you that they are, reaching out just to say how are they, or do they fancy a coffee, can make a world of difference. So maybe we can, this week, practice reaching out to people that we care about. See you next time. Bye.